I have this lazy sister who I had to jeopardize my career for, trying to lay my neck on the line to get her a job. It seems ridiculous I would even have to do that, but guys, it gets so much worse. Loyalty to family can be the greatest bondage, and this is coming from somebody who's paying the costly price. I have a sister, Stella, who's a year younger than I. We're the product of our mother's love life and never led to marriage. Well, the only thing closest to a father figure that we had was Uncle Greg, who was our mother's brother. He had taken care of us for as long as I can remember, and with the way that we carried ourselves, you would not believe we were being helped by someone who has his own family. I graduated from college before my sister, and I was in desperate need of a job. I knew Uncle Greg could help me out because he was a person of influence, so I went to see him. I thanked him for everything that he's been doing for me, and my gratitude was the platform I needed to make my request known. I discussed this with my uncle for a while, and I sensed that the discussion was just a means for him to ascertain if I had wasted my time in college or not. He was satisfied with what he saw and promised to help me secure a job. I've grown to know Uncle Greg as a man who would always make good on his promises, so I was happy as though the job had come. My uncle called me 3 days later to ask that I go to a company with all my documents. So I got there, and to my surprise, Uncle Greg had used his influence to secure me a job as the head of human resources in a company. This was way beyond what I expected. I was just fresh out of college, zero experience. I was glad, though, and decided not to let my uncle be disappointed in me. So I put in all I had for my job, and my sister Stella graduated from college a year later. She too went job hunting, and her efforts were not fruitful, and I suggested she visits our uncle, who was in a better position to help her secure a job too. I planned on going with my sister to see our uncle, but that was not the issue. I knew that once our uncle interacted with my sister, who was a law graduate, he would be very disappointed at what he found. I, for one, was disappointed. All the same, I had to let my uncle see for himself. We got to Uncle Greg's place, and our uncle engaged my sister in a discussion. I kept quiet for most of the time. For somebody who was a law graduate, my sister was so unrefined, and even I could see there was nothing in her head. Uncle Greg did not say anything about my sister, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. After we had spent some time at his place, he promised to help my sister job hunt too. 2 weeks after my sister and I had visited our uncle, she had not yet gotten a favorable reply from him. Stella would reach out to him, but he would simply tell her he was working on it as hard as he could. My mother and sister approached me one evening after I had returned from work and wanted to engage in a discussion. I was too tired and asked that we have the discussion very early the next morning before I went to work. They both woke me up early the next day, and I was not so eager to know the reason why they have been disturbing my peace since the previous day. Stella was the one who started by saying she could not tell what was wrong with Uncle Greg. She blasted him for taking much longer time to get her a job. I stopped her along the way to say that our uncle had been so good to us ever since we've known him, and all he's done has always been in our best interest. I told her that she was just fresh out of college and that there's still time on her hands. Stella cut in and insinuated that our uncle was now playing favorites between the both of us, and her reason was because he had gotten me a job just 3 days after he promised he would, whereas it's been weeks and she was yet to hear from him. Our mother finally got into the conversation by saying that they found a solution for my sister's joblessness. I was happy for my sister until I heard what our mother called to the solution. She suggested that I use my influence as the head of human resources in my firm to bring in Stella as a sales agent with a huge salary. My eyes went wild with shock at what I heard, and I looked at her to see if she was joking, and she further said that it was what anyone in my position would do. She said since I was the head of my department, nobody would even question me. I did not want to immediately say no. I turned to my sister and asked if she had any experience as a sales agent. She replied by asking me if it was necessary. For somebody who was a graduate, she was really stupid. How could she be demanding a job for which she did not even have the needed qualifications and experience for? To make matters worse, she and my mother were both suggesting that she be placed on a very high salary. Well, I clearly told them what they needed to hear. I told my mom it was not possible because Stella was a law student graduate, and it was not related to my line of work in any way. My mother raised her voice at me and said I was not supposed to be looking for experience, but rather to be looking at the bigger picture. The big picture, according to her, was the massive pay that she claimed my sister would be making once I landed her the job. I replied to my mother by telling her that what she and Stella were asking me to do could literally jeopardize my career if my superiors found out that I exhibited favoritism by employing somebody who was incapable of fitting their job. My explanation did not make sense to my mother and sister. They both slammed me, saying that I was not seeking family success. Now, you have to understand what I meant when I said family could be a form of bondage. How can they be insinuating that I did not want the success of my family because I declined to put my career on the line? This was pure selfishness. I dismissed both of them by restating what I had said earlier. I went ahead to prepare for food and nobody said a word. I thought about the discussion all throughout the day and there was just no way I could give in to their demands. I was not even 2 years on the job yet, and I could not start acting like I owned the place. My mom and sister began keeping malice with me. In other words, they were trying to guilt-trip me, and I felt miserable in the house. I intentionally began coming home late, just so that I could spend less time at my home, but that did not help matters either. I finally decided to talk to the one person who I knew would be unbiased about the issue, and that was Uncle Greg. I branched at my uncle's place one day when returning from work, and I told him all about the plan that's been happening in the house, except for the part where my sister accused him of playing favorites between the both of us, of course. After listening to me, Uncle Greg goes to tell me that it was not a big task to get a job for my sister, as he could easily do that with a few phone calls here and there. He noted that he had purposely been stalling the process because he was not convinced my sister was capable of handling the kind of job even in her field. He pointed out certain things that he had observed when he discussed them with her, and I knew he was right because I've observed them too. Uncle Greg said that if he was out to get my sister a job, then it meant he was going to vouch for her, and she could likely mess up his image with her employers, who, by the way, were his friends, and discovered that she was an empty skull. Uncle Greg finally told me that the talk about not wanting family success was a ploy to emotionally blackmail and guilt-trip me, and to doing their bidding. He warned me not to crash my career, which had barely begun, because I wanted to please my selfish sibling. He suggested that I move out of the house and rent an apartment of my own if the pressure was becoming too much. One very touching thing that my uncle said was that there was always going to be situations in a person's life that would force an individual to break free from family influence, and so he encouraged me to see the situation as an opportunity to go ahead and get my independence. I seriously thought about what Uncle said, and he was right. I had to let my mother and sister know that I was now a woman who could not be tossed in any direction they wheeled. But then I just could not do it. I finally decided that I was going to make a one-time compromise for Stella. I walked up to Stella one morning before leaving for work. I asked her to come by the office later in the day just to pick up her appointment letter. You should have seen how, her demeanor immediately lightened up. My mother smiled and reassured me that I was doing the right thing. She was wrong. I was setting myself up for a drastic crash, and I just never knew it. Stella came by the office, got the letter, and resumed work. Resumption, however, was not the issue. Productivity was. Stella was not productive, and it was clear why. It was not her field. 2 months down the line, and most of the staff began complaining about her. I had to confront my own sister before the matter got out of hand, and I pointed out the fact that she was, dead weight to the company because she was not bringing in anything, yet she was overpaid more than some staff and worked hard and were very productive. I made her understand that in a normal circumstance, a move to fire her would have easily been the best option for the company, but I was using my influence to simply stall it. Stella defended herself, right, by saying that she was still new to the job and needed time to learn the ropes. Her reason was understandable. The problem, however, was that she was not willing to actually learn anything. The way she went about the job showed there was zero zeal for it. She just lazily waited for payday, and I asked her to put in some effort, and I was about to dismiss her when she said what almost drove me insane. Stella said she was contemplating asking for a 1-month paid leave so she could attend to her health. I knew there was nothing wrong with her, and she was just making excuses. Here was somebody whom everyone was about to complain on, and I wanted to shield her, but all she wanted to do was raise dust. I bluntly warned Stella to throw the thought of leaving out of her mind. I promised to fire her if she even attempted it. I did not let the matter slide. I got home and called it to my mother's attention, and I reminded her of the assurance that she had given about helping Stella secure a job. A job for which she was barely 2 months old, but now seeking 2 months of paid leave. I told our mother that I would ensure my sister was fired if her level of productivity did not raise that month. Our mother treated the matter lightly. She said it was normal for Stella to find it difficult at the moment, but claimed she would get the hang of it with time. She went on to ask that I remain patient with my sister. I noted that I was going to be patient till the month's end, after which my sister's productivity would determine my action. I'd given my sister the month's end just to sit up, be productive, but it was unfortunate for the both of us because my superior got wind of the complaints that had been going on and summoned my sister and me. A review was carried out, and it was discovered that even though my sister had not been productive ever since she got employed as a sales agent, I had failed to do what was necessary, which in this case was notifying the management to fire her. My favoritism was discovered, and we were both fired on the spot. I began pleading for my job right then and there, but I was told the decision was final. Stella, who was the reason behind our predicament rather than display humility, looked my superiors in the face and noted the job was way beneath her, considering her educational qualifications. She walked out of the office while I remained on my knees, begging for my job. I regretted not heeding Uncle Greg's warnings. What he said had come to pass, and I just let my sister ruin my job, and she was undisturbed about the whole thing. I headed straight home in tears and anger, only to find my sister sitting on the couch with a bowl of popcorn watching a movie. I immediately pounced on her, and we began exchanging words. Our mother immediately rushed to the scene and tried to calm the situation. Stella had not yet told her about what happened, and I directed my anger towards our mother and began shouting at her. I blamed her for emotionally blackmailing me into bringing Stella to my company, and when she discovered what had happened, she immediately raised her voice back at me and demanded I never speak to her in this manner, which I did just that. She was still my mother, regardless. I know it may have been disrespectful to have spoken to her in that way, I know, but my emotions were the better part of me that day. I run out of the house because my mother and sister were the last people I even wanted to even come across or possibly see. I did not know where I was running, but I knew I had to be far away from them before I further disrespected my mother and did something pretty stupid to my sister, which I think that I would regret. I stayed in a hotel for 3 days, and I was just crying my eyeballs out. Neither my mother nor sister reached out to know how I was even faring, right? Well, after staying a while in the hotel, I went straight to Uncle Greg's place. He was surprised to see me at that hour because it was a weekday and I was supposed to be at work. He asked what the issue was, and I just broke down crying. It took him a while to get me settled. And then I began narrating to him how foolish I had been for not heeding his warnings. What I forgot to add was that I've been avoiding his house and calls ever since I helped my sister get the job because I knew he would be saddened by the decision. And I was right. Uncle Greg was initially angry with me for not listening, but his anger almost immediately turned to pity as he understood what it meant to be under pressure from family. He didn't want to hear further. He just asked me to get into his car, and we drove down to our house. Uncle Greg exploded as soon as he got to the house. He was so angry, and he spoke to my mother and sister, and I think for the first time either Stella or I would see him like that. My mother, however, grew up with her brother, so it was not new to her. She refused to be held accountable for my loss and defended herself by saying she did nothing wrong, except asking that I help my sister secure a job. As though that was not enough, she and Stella immediately turned the table against me by saying that rather than guide me at work, I'd let Stella on her own. Uncle Greg knew that they were just trying to avoid blame. He took some seconds to stare at them before turning towards me to reassure me that everything would be all right. He promised he would do all in his power to see that I did not stay jobless for long. I thanked my uncle, who wasted no time in storming out of the house. My mother, upon seeing her brother left the house, turned to me and called me a disgrace. She asked why I had overblown the matter, and even involved somebody who had a little or no business with it. Now, I believe you fully understand why I said loyalty to family can be one's misfortune. What did my mother mean by overblowing the matter? How could she imply that Uncle Greg had no issues with it when he was like a father figure to us and had helped me secure the job in the first place? I did not bother replying to my mom the way my emotions wanted me to. Otherwise, she would have disowned me on the spot. I simply went into my room and shut the door. It's been 2 weeks since the incident, and my sister and I are both jobless. I'm not sitting down and waiting for my uncle to work his magic, though. I've been on the lookout for any job offers available, and I hope for something positive really soon. Update number 1. It has been hell staying at home with my sister and mom. They both teamed up against me and acted like I was not part of the family. I returned last week from one of my unsuccessful ventures to look for a job. I was frustrated and tired, and it seems even my uncle was finding it difficult to secure another job for me, and I honestly did not blame him. If I had been wise, I would not be in this current disaster. So I got back from submitting my qualifications to a firm that promised to get back to me, and I laid down on the couch to rest a bit. I was jolted out of my nap about 5 minutes later when my sister began screaming like she won the lottery. She purposely came to the parlor to act out of her drama because she wanted to look for trouble, as usual. Our mother rushed to her, and she informed her at my hearing that she had been invited for an interview at a law firm. My mother was happy for her, and I was minding my business, but she took a jab at me by saying she was doing for herself what sisters and uncles who claimed to be family could not do for her. Well, I knew she was referring to me and Uncle Greg, and I was not going to have her add to my frustration. I gave a sarcastic laugh and noted that people were busy rejoicing over being invited for an interview, like they had gotten the job. I did not stop there because my statement had not achieved what I wanted it to, and that was to provoke my younger sister. So I simply added that, and I quote, "The people who were inviting people for interviews would soon discover that they've wasted their time setting up an interview with an empty-headed skull." Well, that message very much hit my sister, and she wanted to confront me. She was lucky our mother stepped in. My mother, who had been there and clearly saw my sister, was the one who looked for trouble and supported her. It did not come as a surprise to me because I did not expect anything less. Stella went for an interview and she came back smiling. She told our mother at my hearing that she was preferred above the other candidates that were equally invited, and she got the job on the spot. The pay that she was offered was not as much as she was earning when she worked at my firm, but she was given the assurance that it would be tripled in 3 months. My sister and mother rubbed it in my face, and to be honest, I wondered what kind of employers would hire somebody like my sister. Another thing that I could not help but ponder was the nature of the other candidates that my sister was chosen over. It would mean they were horrible. Anyways, all the same, I'm waiting to see how it'll play out because the Stella I know could not keep a job. Update number 2. I had a serious fight with my mother this morning, and as you can guess, it was because of my sister Stella. Ever since she got her job, my mother had decided no other person in the house would perform any chores besides me, even if it was to lift a pin. I did not complain until this morning when she approached me and demanded that I do my sister's laundry. The demand was insulting and I was not having it. I blatantly told my mother that a gun to my head would still not get my hands on my sister's clothing. My mother claimed that my sister was trying to be focused on her new job, something that according to her I lacked, and the least we could do was support her however we could. So now, according to my mother, I'm the one who lacks the focus to succeed. I asked her if my sister had ever done my laundry when I had my job. I finally told my mother that if my sister was too busy to do her laundry, she could do it for her, or better yet, take it to one of those numerous dry cleaning services in the city. I went into my room and shut the door. That was the height of humiliation. How could my mother demand I do Stella's laundry? So, I called up Uncle Greg over the phone and informed him about the humiliation that my mother and sister were subjecting me to. I equally wanted to see if there was any good news from his end, as a job would end the myriad of insults that were dished at me every day. My uncle noted that he was still trying to pull a few strings, and it might take some time. He was obviously not pleased with the way my mother and sister were treating me, and he promised to talk some sense into my younger sister. I was in my room that evening when Stella returned from work and her phone began to ring. She immediately began shouting at the person on the other side of the phone, and from the words she said, I deduced she was talking to Uncle Greg. She rebuked him for meddling in affairs that were not business and demanded he stay away from us. I heard my mother ask her who it was she was talking to, and she said it was, and I quote, "that man who doesn't know his place." My mother knew it was her brother that her daughter was talking about, and she said it served him right. She then said to my hearing that I was so stupid for taking every single matter to an outsider. Please, when did the only father figure we've ever had in our lives become an outsider? Update number 3. I've moved in with my uncle and his family. He was the one who extended the invitation after Stella had shouted at him over the phone. Her action proved to him that I was indeed going through a lot at home, and I told my mom that I was going over to Uncle Greg's place to stay till I could find a place of my own. But she simply said that I was free to move out because according to her, I'd been looking for every opportunity to cut myself off from her and Stella anyways. The only time I would see or hear from Stella was in a month's time when she showed up at her uncle's place to invite the both of us to an award event organized by her firm. According to Stella, the event was set up to identify the efforts of key individuals in the firm, and she was one of those who would be honored that day for her contribution to the firm thus far. Those who were going to be honored were asked to bring their family members if they chose, and Stella wanted me and Uncle Greg to be there. I knew that her only reason for wanting our presence at that event was to make us see that her company was actually identifying her as being productive. I'm not even going to lie. It didn't make sense, and it was equally shocking because Stella had been working for the company for less than 60 days, and they're suddenly recognizing her productivity. Yeah, right. I told her that rather than offer our uncle an invite to the party, she was supposed to be offering him an apology for the way that she had spoken to him the last time over the phone. Stella was irritated. She did not mind the fact that our uncle's family members were present. She just looked at the both of us in a condescending manner and said that she was giving him something that I could never give, and that was an opportunity to see his niece decorated in glory. I could stand her insulting me, but I would never let her make fun of our uncle, especially in front of his own family. So I asked her to take her leave before I gave her the beating of a lifetime. I equally told her I was not going to attend the party or whatever it was, and Uncle Greg did not seem offended. He promised that we would be there and Stella took her leave. Uncle Greg is currently trying to get me to attend the party, and I don't understand why he would want us to attend a party that was meant to ridicule us. Anyways, I'll update you soon. Update number 4. Final update of the story. It all makes sense now. I finally saw the reason why Uncle Greg wanted us to attend Stella's party so bad, and he even insisted that I looked my best. We attended the party as promised, and my mother was present as expected. The ceremony, which was held biannually, began, and it got to the part where individuals would be recognized for their efforts. Well, some folks were called up and given a reward, and it got to the turn of my sister Stella. Stella, who was looking her best, mounted the podium to receive the accolades that would be showered upon her. Her boss was about to make a statement when she cut him off and began talking. She just could not wait for the rain of glory that would soon shower upon her. Stella began talking about how the day was special to her, as a lot of expected hurdles had hindered her way to success. And at this point, she pointed directly at me. I knew she was going to rub her shine in my face, but I never expected her to go to such extent. She then went on to say that against all odds, she refused ending up a failure like me, who lacked the drive to simply succeed. She thanked our mother, of course, and our mother was very grateful to be put in the spotlight. I wanted to live in the scene, but Uncle Greg held me tightly. After Stella was done, her boss handed her a letter and asked her to still stand on the platform while his long-time friend would come up in rounds, and, well, to my amazement, Stella's boss called upon Uncle Greg. Our uncle climbed up to the podium where Stella was standing, surprised, and thanked his friend, aka her boss, for helping him prove Stella was a never-do-well. He told everybody gathered that all Stella had said about me was false. He explained to them how I had lost my job because of Stella and my mother's selfishness. Uncle Greg then said that he had asked his friend to help set up this whole employment scheme so we could watch Stella's performance and prove to both her and her mother that Stella had, well, willed away her time in school. After telling the people present that Stella had not been productive for the firm at all, he turned to her and informed her that, what her boss had given her was a letter saying she's fired. Shame and embarrassment flooded Stella, and my mother could not wait a second more. She immediately ran away. Uncle Greg introduced me to some people that day, and he assured me that a job would soon surface in no distant time. I've been cut off from my mother and my sister, and I know it's only a matter of time before they come crawling back to my uncle and me for assistance. Well, I'll definitely be waiting. Oh, Stella. I'm going to agree with most of the commenters that are saying Stella had this coming, and OP deserved to be treated a lot better. Luckily for OP, she had her uncle, Uncle Greg, who was able to elaborately set Stella up to, well, take the brunt end of the stick. Guys, I want to know your thoughts about this, exactly what you would have done if you were in OP's position. And let's just say this, let's add a little twist to it. What do you think OP would have done if she did not have this uncle to fall back on? Let me know your thoughts, guys. Drop it downstairs in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate drama stories every single day. Inheritance dramas, mother-in-law dramas, inheritance disputes. I'm talking cheating stories, Karen in the Wilds, Bridezillas. I could go on and on. Guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.